Hello everyone. So there is a common adage concerning demo as a class, and it's generally that, you know, demo is the class with two primary weapons as opposed to the others that just have one. While I don't think that's necessarily wrong, I don't think it's completely accurate, or there's better ways to think about it rather, which we'll get to later. But for now, I kind of just want to talk about what each weapon does and when you would want to be using one over the other, and yeah, what they're effective at. So I guess we'll start with pipes actually. This is actually a re-recording because I don't think I separated my thoughts very clearly in a very followable format earlier. So we're redoing it, trying to keep things structured. So starting with pipes. Does not matter which pipes you're using, whether it be Iron Bomber, stock, or lock and load. They all strive to do the same thing, which is primarily deal a lot of damage. Pipes can kind of deal game-changing amounts of damage from across the map, because hitting someone for 100 is a lot. Like, piping a med across the map is something that can immediately be bombed off of, and sometimes just wins you a fight, depending on how your team takes advantage. And no other weapon really does that. Stickies don't do that, or at least a sticky doesn't do that. So being able to deal that amount of damage from really anywhere is a big deal, and pipes will change the tide of fights. It will clean up kills. It will just annihilate players. And yeah, I mean, it's just a call out of its own. It's like a player is piped. Everyone knows that is a lot of damage. They are, very vulnerable now. So pipes are very good at that. Another thing that pipes are good at is providing immediate damage. So stickies are kind of slow sometimes. They have a charge time. They have a fuse time before they can be dead. And sometimes that's a big deal. Like, if a player is especially up in your face, like melee range in your face, a sticky takes a long time to arm, and by that point, like, not only could that player be dealing like a ton of damage to you, but they also might have moved from where you shot, and like the sticky is not, in range anymore, on top of just the fact that, like, a pipe, you just hit them and they die, right? So it provides a lot of immediate damage. And yeah, those are like the main two drivers of what makes pipes good. I mean, I suppose like Iron Bomber and stock have rollers, but that's not really like much of a consideration. You never really play for your rollers. It's just an added bonus, and like a nice consistent chip damage for players getting through doors if pipes are missing. But anyway, there are some downsides to pipes, and the big one is they're inconsistent. Sometimes, like, hitting that pipe across the map on a player actually just feels kind of random for the player getting piped and the user. And actually, a lot of lock and load complaint comes from like how random it can feel to get piped. Just because, you're standing in a place where you're not expecting the demo to be in range to do that massive amount of damage. But in fact, they are. But, any cope aside, there is definitely inconsistency to pipes and very easy to miss. So it's not uncommon for a player to really need the immediate damage of a pipe and choose to hit up or try to hit a pipe for that immediate damage, only for them to miss 3 pipes and then do 0 damage, and then the situation goes poorly when they very well could have been contributing to the fight or the player that needed to die, or what have you. So the inconsistency of pipes are really like the big deal, on top of the fact that a lot of the time as a demo, your job is not just to deal damage, but to control space. And pipes are not as good at that as your other weapon is. And in fact, like, pipes can't really deny space much at all. They're not any better at shooting high ground than like an upward direct is. I suppose they have like an arc to them, which makes them like slightly better. But they're not good tools for denying space, denying high ground, and denying enemy positioning, which are all very important tools for a demo to have. So yeah, that's where pipes stand. And I will say now that my motivation making this was that overuse of pipes is one of the most common mistakes I see new players make. To the point where if I'm reviewing, like demo reviewing a new demo, basically without fail, I know I'm going to see multiple situations in which they should have been using stickies and instead are using pipes. And they had the availability of more reliable damage and stickies, and instead were just trying to get the immediate damage of pipes and missing and doing nothing. So spoiler, the stickies are going to be more consistent at dealing damage. But yeah, you definitely want to be considerate to how you're using pipes, because they are a very powerful tool and will absolutely like annihilate health bars. But they can be inconsistent, and when you need consistency, which, you know, consistency is a very good thing to have, you may be better off leaning more into stickies. But yeah, with that being said, let's talk about stickies, because they are a pretty weird weapon. I do think part of the reason why so many new players end up using pipes so often is because it's a much easier weapon to understand. You know, pipes function very similarly to the rocket launcher or the scattergun or something, where you literally just click and then it deals damage, or click and it shoots a projectile that explodes and deals damage, right? So it's very easy to understand in that sense. You just hit the player and they die. Stickies are a little different. For starters, I mean, shooting someone directly with you're still aiming at people most of the time. But not really at them. Like, if you hit a player with a pipe, then the pipe explodes and it deals damage. If you hit a player with a sticky, the sticky bounces off of them, and sometimes it bounces away from them. And a lot of the time you're actually trying to shoot the floor where they're at, which is a little bit different. And oftentimes with stickies, you're not so much shooting at a person as you are a place. You're like shooting at the area that the person is in, which makes a lot of sense in the context of denying high ground. Like, it's not so important if a scout is like running on the height or just trying to occupy the height, or like a soldier on the height. It's not so important that that player takes damage. You certainly want to be dealing damage to them, but it's more important that they are not in that place of the map. They're not on that high ground. So you're oftentimes shooting at a place in a case like that. And to some extent, actually, pipes can function like that as well, where you're more so like shooting to deal damage in a choke than you are at a specific player, or like shooting at a clump or something like that. Yeah, but stickies can be weird like that, because you're oftentimes shooting at an area of the map that you're expecting a person to be to get damage on them. On top of that, unlike a pipe where you just shoot the pipe and it misses and it either gets roller chip or provides no value whatsoever, stickies most of the time are at least serving a purpose when they've missed but haven't been dead. Just zoning people out is a really useful tool for demo, and leaving stickies undetonated is a really good way to control space on the map. And, you know, you're forcing the other team to either respect the space and play like more cornered up, where they're likely to take more spam and can't maneuver around as well, or you're making them waste time clearing your stickies, or they're just not even going to notice, and you're going to get a ton of damage when they actually do walk over them and you det and then kill them. So stickies are really unique as a zoning tool, and they function really well as that. The reliability of sticky damage as well cannot be understated, because not only can you detonate them whenever you want, meaning like compared to pipes where you either hit that tiny little hitbox against the player to get the damage. Stickies you can kind of think as for the entire arc of their travel time, from the time that they're ready to det until they land, that whole arc is basically like the full blast radius worth of potential, damage hitting the opponent. If you can time your det through the air, then that entire path they're vulnerable to damage, and it's as a result it's no surprise it's like way easier to get damage on people, on top of the fact that it just like has a bigger explosion radius than like rollers do, for instance. And yeah, it's just way easier to get reliable damage out of stickies. So with all that in mind, with the kind of uniqueness in denying like space and zoning, as well as just the reliability of dealing damage kind of at will, stickies are the preferred weapon for demos, and usually their primary way of dealing damage. Oftentimes, if you look at logs and you look at the damage spread, the kind of go-to for, or not go-to, but the results, like the most common outcome for most demos, is about like a 70 to 30 damage spread of 70% sticky damage, 30% pipes. Now, sometimes you'll see the pipe damage go upwards of like 50%. If you see higher than that, it's usually from people who don't play demo much and are just only using pipes because they just haven't learned how to use stickies much. Because stickies are, like, again, kind of harder to figure out and be really good with, no matter, like, despite them being as good as they are. So yeah, like that 30 to 70 split generally. I tend to underuse pipes, honestly. Because I tend to get, like, sometimes I'll even get upwards of like 85% sticky damage, 15% pipes. And I could probably afford to just, rip it more. But I just like the consistency of being able to hit people for like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, depending on the range. But anyway, something to keep in mind. But now, with that in mind, let's talk disadvantages of stickies. And it's kind of alluded to in the advantages that pipes have over it. First one being, at range, stickies do deal a lot of damage, but by demo standards, it's not, like, insane. Like, you can see I hit that demo for 40. Now, if that sticky were really good and I was, like, right in their model, rather than it being a little bit away, then that could be, like, closer to 55, ish damage. But point being, like, that's half as much damage as hitting a pipe would at that range. And by demo standards, it's not as much. Still being able to hit people for like 60 from across the map is a big deal, and that's why demo is like such a superb class at dealing damage. But it's just manageable. Like, if a player has a buff, that's just chipping away at their buff, versus, hitting them with the pipe is a lot more substantial. Now, the fact that you can hit them more reliably with stickies, of course, balances that out, but nonetheless. The other big thing is that stickies can be slow. And that's a big deal, because if there's a player that's just in on you and you need that immediate damage, then sometimes a sticky will be too slow. Like there you can see, for instance, I shot the sticky, but died before it could ever even hit the floor or be in a state of, being ready to det. I will say there are some times, and many times actually, where you might think you need immediate damage right now, or else you're screwed, when actually you can afford to be a little patient with a sticky and it works out better. Part of that's just experience, but I'd be lying if I said the slowness of a sticky to like prime is not a downside, because it is. Alright, so with that in mind, let's talk situations in which you'd want to prioritize stickies more often. So, I already talked about you'd want to be like using pipes and disadders when you have traps up and stuff like that. So you want to be using stickies in... So you want to be using well, here, the phrasing is so difficult, because I'll talk about it when I get to the third thing, but for cases where you want to be using almost entirely stickies, a situation that comes to mind is last scenarios. For pushes and holds, you can get away with like mixing some pipes here and there, but you should very much hyper focus on having stickies loading, prioritizing having that ammo. Because when it comes to playing the objective, stickies are just so far superior. And it's kind of ridiculous. So, like, a pipe, when it comes to denying, like, the other team from capping your last, excuse me, is only a threat for, you know, a second or something, for while it's in the air. So as long as the scout trying to cap, you know, can dodge that pipe, the threat no longer exists and they can get right back on point. Versus, if it's a sticky on point, or you shoot a sticky at the point, that threat exists indefinitely until the scout either clears it, at which point you can just shoot another, or they just tank the damage, or they just don't cap. All things are, you know, advantageous for you as the demo. So yeah, those are things. Those situations are like you really, really, really want to be prioritizing sticky usage when it comes to playing an objective like that, as well as like trapping your own player off point if you're pushing last and want to be capping. Basically, when it comes to the objective-based gameplay, stickies just far outshine pipes to the point where, like, that's very much, like, to the point where sometimes even reloading a sticky and not even firing it is more useful use of your time than shooting a pipe. But yeah, that is an important tool for those last situations, just the objective-oriented stuff. But now I want to talk about the secret third thing. Because we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of pipes and stickies, and when you would want to be using pipes, when you would want to be using stickies. But we didn't talk about when you would want to be using both. And that's the secret. The secret is not that Demo has two primaries. It's that Demo has one primary made up of two weapons. And the primary means for Demo to deal damage is a combination of stickies and pipes. This applies for pretty much all, like, mid-range combat. For the really long-range stuff, like, if you're playing, like, a Snakewater mid, for instance, you might not get a ton of value from pipes. You might be prioritizing just using stickies, just because the other team is going to be so far away that any player that sees you shoot a pipe usually has time to react to the pipe being fired, and can just dodge it. Unless, like, Lock, you can sometimes get away with some stuff, but still, like, it's usually pretty reactable versus stickies. Like, you're just playing the zoning at that point. But for, like, most mid-range combat, you want to be using both weapons. And you'll see in high-level demo gameplay, they are switching between the two pretty frequently when there's active fighting going on. For a few reasons. For starters, Demo is uniquely equipped to synchronize damage in multiple ways. So I have a main channel video about sticky syncs as like a means to kind of synchronize damage. I don't think any other class can really burst damage like Demo can, at least not like a sniper or spy or anything. Like any of the combat classes, Soldier can do rocket syncs, but it requires so much setting up and like such a commitment as far as positioning. You're basically just like that is your play, and you're oftentimes dying for it, is like trying to sync. Versus a Demo, you can burst damage with a number of your tools. So for starters, I mean, I already mentioned syncing sticks. But syncing sticks and pipes together is also another means to burst damage. So you can just erase a class, you can erase a scout, erase a soldier that's been jumping, erase a demo, erase a medic, pretty much erase anyone without a buff just with a sticky and a pipe. And being able to sticky pipe people is a big deal. And of course requires the use of both weapons. So usually you want to be kind of defaulting to stickies, have those out more often. Like you only want to have pipes out if you're actively shooting a pipe. Versus having stickies out is really important because, and this is important, you want to be starting pretty much every engagement that you plan to use stickies or pipes in with stickies. Because of the downside of the slowness, it's much better to start off by shooting a sticky, because you are getting that arm time out of the way as soon as possible. Versus if you shoot a pipe and then shoot a sticky, that damage is like very separate. Actually, like more separated than if you just shot 2 pipes. Versus if you shoot a sticky and then switch and shoot a pipe after, the potential damage there is pretty much in sync, which is really useful to have for like dealing, you know, burst damage, and also just having the immediate sticky damage as soon as you can is nice. So starting engagements with stickies is a pretty important thing to be doing. But also, I do want to talk about how stickies and pipes kind of enable each other. So stickies as a zoning tool make pipes way easier to hit, and that's a big deal because, again, pipes are just such like insane amounts of damage that completely turn the tide of fights and engagements, and being able to deal that damage is really important. And being able to use stickies as a means to not only just get damage on players directly, but to force certain movement patterns or positionings or something that makes players easier to pipe is really important and really helpful to have. So even just shooting a sticky at a player tends to make them move more predictably. But you can get more like in depth with it and be like cornering people with sticks, just kind of ensnaring them in the web to you can even just continue like sticking them off for direct damage with sticks, but you can use that to incorporate like pipe damage as well. And also pipes are a really good combo tool with sticks, not just because of sticks enabling them to be, you know, more accurate and hit more often, but also like the punch of a pipe is like a fantastic finisher for sticky damage, or like vice versa. Point being, having that really good damage accessory makes like the stickies way more lethal, because you can get like 2 stickies on a player and a lot of the time they might just like live with eating like a ton of damage, mind you, but still they could theoretically get out from it, versus like having just so much damage present in a pipe can confirm more kills and just be generally more lethal. So yeah, you really want to think about the two as collaborative tools to use rather than one or the other. You can only have one out at a time, and you can only be firing one at a time, but as a demo you kind of just just deal damage, right? You just use the tools at your disposal. I don't really go into fights thinking like I want to be using pipes here or stickies here. There are certainly times where it's like, okay, I mean, I have traps up, so obviously I'm not going to just be deading for nothing and want to be using pipes. And there's going to be times where it's like, okay, I need to hit this soldier for 50, otherwise my med dies, I'm going to be using a sticky. And that's kind of just like muscle memory and just feeling out the benefits of the different weapons. But if I'm playing a mid-fight, I'm not really thinking that much about when I pull out a pipe to try and like sink some damage. It's kind of you develop it as second nature because, again, they work the best together. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I want to be covering. I think ammo management is probably a different topic. But yeah, that's probably going to be all from me. Yeah, the classic 2 primaries, you kind of just want to be using them both. Again, stickies are just the reliable backbone, and pipes are kind of like the fireworks. So, oh yeah, the thing I would want to close off on is, like, the question people ask is, when should you be using stickies, when should you be using pipes? And I've kind of outlined, like, the positives and negatives of each. And, you know, even just a few seconds ago, talking about how stickies are the backbone and pipes are kind of the fireworks. That being said, if your pipes are just hitting, then it's usually just better, honestly. Like, if every pipe is connecting, then it doesn't even matter if you're using it in technically, like, the wrong situation. Now, the reliability issue is why, you know, everyone uses stickies more often, but, like, you shouldn't be, like, scolding people for just using pipe, or scolding yourself or something for, like, hitting 4 pipes and winning a fight when stickies are, like, maybe the smarter tool there. Because the stickies are the backbone because of the reliability. If the if pipes are not, like, there's not a reliability issue there, then they are actually kind of broken. Yeah, that's really just the cut and dry of it. Oh yeah, ending right as the demo ends here. Swift 4-0 in Grand Finals. Whatever. Gonna call things there. And yeah, hopefully that was useful somewhat. Kind of lost the plot sometimes, I felt like. Anyway, see you guys later.